In January 2024, there was a piece of news that Iran launched a missile strike on a Pakistani militant group called Haish-ul-Adl. This group is based in Balochistan province. Many people couldn't understand this. They wondered, hey, wasn't Iran in the middle of a conflict with the Americans, launching ballistic missiles? How did they find the time to bomb Pakistan too? And isn't Pakistan supposed to be on our side? They couldn't grasp it. Then, after bombing Pakistan, Iran and Pakistan held joint military exercises. What does that even mean? It feels like Iran slapped Pakistan in the face, and Pakistan didn't mind, then turned around and said, let's have military exercises together. This all happened within a single day, which made it even more confusing. In reality, the reason some things in this world are hard to understand is because we don't grasp the underlying basics. For example, Pakistan is Sunni, while Iran is Shia, but Balochistan is mostly Shia. Of course, I'm not saying all of Balochistan is Shia, but the majority are. Logically, Balochistan should have a good relationship with Iran, but it doesn't. Why? Because Balochistan, located near the coast along the Hormuz Strait, is home to the Gwadar port. Once I mentioned Gwadar port, I'm sure everyone understands. China is currently constructing the port, and once completed, will have 44 years of usage rights and the ability to station troops there. Why is Pakistan being so generous? Why are they giving away land just like that? Actually, Balochistan has never really listened to Pakistan's government. Why? Because Pakistan's government is Sunni, while Balochistan is mostly Shia. Additionally, Balochistan has ambitions of independence. So, the Pakistani government and Balochistan don't see eye to eye. This is hard for us Chinese to understand because there are few countries in the world with such a strong sense of national identity as China. Especially among major nations, China might be the only one with such a deep national identity. Not even the United States has it. The US is more about group interests. When America loses its interests, that's when the American dream will shatter. When the US can no longer profit, it will fall apart just like that, but China is different. Throughout history, regardless of whether they were warlords, bandits, or scholar rebels, none of them aimed to just carve out a corner for themselves. From the day they rebelled, they declared their goal to unite all of China and become the emperor. That's why China hasn't split for 2,000 years. There's only one such country in the world, and it's China. So, like most countries in the world, Pakistan is essentially a coalition of tribes representing their regions externally. Within Pakistan, Balochistan doesn't follow orders and doesn't recognize this external representation. That's why Pakistan gave us Gwadar port. From Pakistan's perspective, it's not a loss. After all, it wasn't really theirs, and they weren't listening anyway. But we, China, desperately need this port. Why? Because Gwadar port is far superior to Kyaukphyu port. Although Kyaukphyu bypasses the Malacca Strait, it still has to pass through India. Gwadar port, however, provides direct access to the Middle East and is a natural deepwater port. What does that mean? It means the port is naturally deep, with no shallow areas. Less than 5 kilometers from the coastline, it reaches deep water, allowing for docking of ships over 300,000 tons. At the time, when China and Pakistan were negotiating for Gwadar port, many parties tried to disrupt it. Not only the US and India, but even Singapore initially won the bid. Singapore was the first to win the bid, but after securing it, they did nothing, sitting on it for years. The intention was clear. They would rather let Gwadar port sit idle than let it fall into Chinese hands. Some people don't understand, saying, aren't most Singaporeans ethnically Chinese? Why would they do this to China? In reality, nations only care about interests, not emotions. Singapore's thinking was simple. Once Gwadar port is fully developed, China would no longer need to use the Malacca Strait. Singapore's prosperity and stability depend on controlling the Malacca Strait. If they lose this advantage, they'll be left with nothing. So, China had to employ many strategies to finally secure Gwadar port. I believe it was in 2016 when Gwadar port officially began operations, although it wasn't fully constructed yet. Even though it wasn't complete, smaller vessels were already able to pass through. But think about it. Would India and the US just let us smoothly complete the final construction of Gwadar port? Definitely not. So, they funded the Balochistan Liberation Army, which is a Shia militant group. At that time, they killed quite a few of our people and constantly caused disruptions. Some of our Confucius institutes were even bombed, and teachers were killed. Given this situation, do you think we would just accept the losses? Of course not. We've never suffered losses like this in the world. I recall it was in October 2022 when the Pakistani military used CH-24 drones to eliminate at least 10 terrorists. What's the story behind this? The fact is, we had sold CH-24 drones to Pakistan long before. So why was it only in October 2022 that they achieved such significant results in Balochistan? This ties into our discussion of electronic warfare. You need to understand the principles. If you only purchase these drones, no matter how advanced they can't reach their full potential. The real maximum efficiency comes from having a system that can coordinate them. For example, coordinating the takeoff and landing times of drones, ensuring continuous surveillance and strikes across the entire airspace 24/7. You also need a database to identify the targets. When a drone detects something suspicious, it needs to quickly decide whether to fire. Combat opportunities are fleeting, and if you have to wait for approval from higher-ups, the moment is lost. So, the truth is that by October 2022, we had, for the first time, integrated the 1,000-hand Guanyin system with Pakistan's CH-4 drones, specifically the CH-4B model. Why the CH-4B? Because it has enhanced capabilities. But no matter what, the CH-4 drones are not considered top-tier in China's drone industry. They're like children sitting at the kids' table. However, in Balochistan, they are like gods of death. Once integrated with the 1,000-hand Guanyin system, drones could take turns monitoring the air 24 hours a day. As soon as the Balochistan Liberation Army showed itself, a missile would be launched instantly. Moreover, our Chinese-made missiles are very cheap. After 2 months of bombing, by December 2022, many of the Balochistan Liberation Army members couldn't survive anymore and fled. Where did they go? They ran to Iran. You need to look at a map. Balochistan borders Iran. The Balochistan Liberation Army, being Shia, shares the same language and appearance with the locals, so it's easy for them to blend in. This is why in 2023, many bloggers who visited Iran reported that the Iranian people were particularly unfriendly towards Chinese people. They experienced hostility, like when Chinese tourists in Iran were given change with cockroaches in it just to discuss them. Why did this happen? It was caused by the Balochistan Liberation Army spreading rumors there, saying how terrible we are, how we slaughtered their people, and used drones to attack them. That's the root of it. Later, these Balochistan Liberation Army members infiltrated back into Balochistan from Iran, continuing their sabotage against us. To be honest, securing Gwadar port has been incredibly difficult. We've already invested over 50 billion yuan, and it's starting to take shape, but in 2023, our engineers and workers faced multiple terrorist attacks, resulting in significant casualties. The so-called Haishu-Aladal and other groups there, not just one group but several, continued with kidnappings and bombings, mainly targeting our Gwadar port and the China-Pakistan Railway. We've been building the China-Pakistan Railway for 8 years now, and it's still not complete. This is the reason why they keep causing disruptions. Our China-Pakistan Railway starts in Kashgar, Xinjiang, and runs through the entire length of Pakistan to Gwadar port. Once this railway is completed, Xinjiang and the western region of China will experience tremendous development. The thing about railways is that the first one is the hardest to build, laying it bit by bit. But once the first railway is operational, the second and third ones become much easier to construct. Why? Because the materials for the second railway, rails, sleepers, gravel, can be transported along the first railway. Once the first railway is running, the second and third ones can be built in no time. Therefore, our China-Pakistan Railway is a crucial part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. We always give these projects romantic names like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the Belt and Road Initiative, or the New Silk Road, which sound poetic but are actually very pragmatic. Each corridor is linked to enormous economic interests. Once this railway is completed and connected to Gwadar port, heading west from Gwadar, it's just 2 centimeters on the map to the Middle East, reaching the Strait of Hormuz. If you don't plan on buying Middle Eastern oil, you can head south to Africa, where we also have major oil customers. This would completely shatter the first and second island chains and break the blockade of the Malacca Strait and the Indian Ocean by India, leaving us with unrestrained access to the seas. What's more, we could even reverse the blockade on East Asia in the future. What does that mean? It means that not only Japan and South Korea but the entire ASEAN region might have to listen to us when it comes to foreign trade. Why? Because we won't depend on the Malacca Strait or the Indian Ocean anymore. If you don't rely on something, you can destroy it or blockade it. Everyone else would be stuck. Imagine us positioning a few aircraft carriers at the Malacca Strait, blocking it or finding some excuse, like fighting pirates. What would happen to all of East Asia? They would be stuck. But we wouldn't be affected because we could use Gwadar Port, and rail transport can be just as efficient as shipping, if not faster. So, regarding Balochistan, Gwadar Port, and the China-Pakistan Railway, no matter how much we invest, it's worth it as long as we can make it work. But this is an open secret. What do I mean by that? The whole world knows what you're trying to do. So, there's an old Chinese saying, dark deeds are easy to do, but open ones are hard to achieve. Let's talk about life for a moment. What does this mean? It means that if you want to accomplish something in society, you shouldn't brag about it before it's done. You must keep things under wraps and not let too many people know. Why? Our ancestors said that dark deeds are easy to do, but open ones are hard to achieve. Whether what you're doing is beneficial to others or not, you must keep it a secret. Even if it doesn't affect others' interests, there might still be those who get envious and trip you up, making it impossible for you to succeed. This is why dark deeds are easy to do, but open ones are hard to achieve. But in our case, this has to be an open secret because the whole world knows that China wants to develop Gwadar Port and build the China-Pakistan Railway. No matter how romantic the name sounds, whether it's the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor or anything else, it's not really about doing business with Pakistan. It's about securing a route to the sea. Because of this, the US and India have been providing massive support to the Baloch Liberation Army BLA, which has launched a series of terrorist attacks. Take last year, for instance. At the end of 2023, one of the Baloch Liberation Army factions came with 70 people to surrender. They claimed they were surrendering, but it wasn't really that. Their leader came and cried, saying they wouldn't fight anymore and that it was all India's doing. They provided the funds, and their main goal was to attack Chinese people and sabotage the China-Pakistan Railway. Now the whole world knows about this. Imagine a country supporting terrorism and being exposed in front of the world how dirty they must appear. And still, they dream of joining the UN Security Council as a permanent member. That's just a fantasy. Some people in this world never understand their place. Now you might ask, the Baloch Liberation Army keeps targeting us, so what should we do? Well, in recent years, we haven't been slacking off. We've been sending drones to Pakistan like they're free of charge. And the best part, they don't even need to be transported. Just fill them up with fuel, press a button, and they'll fly over on their own. When they need maintenance, they don't need to be transported back either. Just fill them up with fuel, press a button, and they'll fly back. These things have such a long range, usually about 4,000 kilometers, and they don't require human operation. Especially after integrating with the thousand-handed Guanyin system. The database of terrorists, including facial recognition and phone data, allows us to deal with them the same way the US dealt with bin Laden. According to the leader who surrendered, they couldn't even show their faces in the past 2 years. They didn't dare to look up at the sky because if they did, a missile would be on its way in no time. It felt like the wrath of God descending upon them. Balochistan is not that large, about 500 kilometers from north to south and 300 kilometers from east to west. That's a rough estimate, not precise, but close enough. In such a small airspace, one drone is more than enough. Why? Because drones fly fast, and they carry missiles with at least a 100-kilometer range. Moreover, these are short-range, inexpensive, lightweight missiles. The terrorists' facial recognition and voice signals are all stored in our thousand-handed Guanyin database. As soon as they dare to make a phone call or look up at the sky, our Rainbow 4B drone equipped with supersensory capabilities will instantly launch a missile if there's a match, without needing to consult with higher-ups. So, life hasn't been easy for the Baloch Liberation Army in the past 2 years. Their only hope for survival is to seek refuge in Iran. Not from the Iranian government, but from religious protection within Iran. After all, they're all Shiites, so they're like brothers. Now, if Iran goes to war with the US, the Gwadar port issue will be resolved, as will the Balochistan issue. What does this mean? Let me explain it again. If Iran fires upon the US, Iran might feel a bit anxious, thinking, "Oh, no, I've really stirred the pot this time." In such a situation, Iran would need to find a strong ally. Even though Russia is its primary backer, Russia is somewhat weakened and unstable domestically. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, so Iran would look for another strong ally for support. Now, if the Baloch Liberation Army repeatedly sought refuge with me, relying on our shared Shiite faith, that would make the big brother unhappy. Iran would have no choice but to take action and offer a peace gesture by targeting the Baloch Liberation Army. Even though they're Shiites like us, survival takes precedence, and we have to strike them down. Iran then launched an attack. For Pakistan, this was a cause for celebration. Finally, the Balochistan rebels, who always disobeyed and sought refuge with Iran, were taken out. For the Pakistani government, this was a joyous moment, and the powers behind the scenes probably just smiled and nodded in approval. This is the reasoning behind it. So far, I haven't seen any major online influencers with millions of followers explain this situation clearly. Why? Because to explain it clearly, you need to understand the history and the current situation. Today, we are limited on time, and there are many details we haven't covered, like how the Baloch Liberation Army came to be. It was actually supported by the former Soviet Union when they invaded Afghanistan. At that time, a certain big country was sending weapons to Afghanistan through Pakistan to fight the Soviets, and the Soviets couldn't just sit idle. So they supported a faction in Balochistan called the Baloch Liberation Army, which was against a certain big country. After the Soviet Union collapsed, they lost funding and were on the brink of disbanding. Later, India picked up where the Soviets left off to cause trouble for us. So, that's the process. Now, look at how Iran bombed Balochistan, targeting mainly the so-called Justice Army and these Baloch Liberation Army militants. This peace gesture is quite sincere. And right after that, on the 18th, Pakistan began conducting joint military exercises. Based on this, you can already imagine what will happen next. Of course, what I'm about to say will never be reported in the news. Iran and Pakistan share a border. From now on, Iran will continuously receive advanced, cutting-edge weapons from Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan doesn't make these weapons themselves, they don't have that capability. It might even include the intelligence network from the thousand-handed Gwanyan system, which is more powerful than any weapon. If you're not familiar with this, I suggest you watch my electronic warfare series. Start from the first episode, and you'll understand how terrifying the data link is. This is why the Russia-Ukraine war has turned out the way it has. When the war first started, everyone in the world thought Ukraine would be defeated in no time. But why has the war dragged on for 2 years, with Ukraine still able to resist? It's because the US integrated its C4 data link system into Ukraine's military. This is what is often referred to in the news as the US providing intelligence systems to Ukraine. If our thousand-handed Gwanyan system were to be used in Iran, it would be a game changer. Of course, this is just speculation. Let me say this upfront for platform reviewers, don't take it seriously. This is purely fictional. Any resemblance to actual events is purely coincidental. Alright, that's about all for this topic.